And you're on. Thanks.
You got a 5-minute break or something?
Yeah, I gotta use the bathroom too. Good job,
There's
dude.
the.
Hey, let me
Take a time. I'm going to give you a good introduction.
Give about a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
It hit the head.
Okay. I'll introduce you while you're pissing.
Do I?
I'll introduce you while you're pissing.
Okay.
some of the new
Let me
info
just-
coming out.
let me get some water.
Stuff that they just did last week. I never would have put that together without going to that other conference last week. Like that would have been not in my presentation.
How can we get some of those maps you have on your ones?
I'll just send me an email and send it to you. I have that stuff routinely all over my stuff.
Okay. Thank you very much.
That thing usually takes me an hour and a half to do. Us in 60 minutes. All right.
Good night.
I'm not leaving. I'm just going to take a break. Yeah, take a break quick. I'll be right back.
Is this your phone, bro, or is this probably Greg's? No, maybe.
Yeah, he said he was using it for a time.
2? Okay.
Yeah.
David or Greg?
David.
Oh. Dubai.
Your phone?
Yeah, thanks.
I'll be
Yeah,
downstairs
right
at
there.
3 if you want to talk.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm just going to drop my stuff. I'll be right back. I want to listen to Greg.
Okay, cool. So our next speaker is going to need a minute, and it's Greg Allison. For those of you, how many of you know Greg Allison? Yeah, for those of you that don't, I'll give you a little background. He's been on Leak Project with Rex Bear several times. They've talked about esoteric things. He is a contractor at NASA. He is a hillbilly rocket scientist. He holds Guinness books. He is in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the most psychotic hillbilly rocketeer. And he basically can take a tube and some accelerant and blow shit up into space, which is why he's the first person I called and said, can we get a satellite near the moon that's ours? And unfortunately that we could do that. It would probably cost us at least $1.5 million. And it would be tiny and it may fail. And people like Rex Bear, Greg Allison, and Diamond don't have $1.5 million to fail. But that's probably all the money we'll ever see ever, forever. Yeah. And that would suck if that failed. So the reason Greg is at the conference is because he is an insider with the powers that be that have been lying to you since they were created to hide the fact that we went to the moon to find out if we're all going to blow up. Because when they went to the moon, they weren't trying to race to the moon to be the first one. We're so smart scientists. They were trying to find evidence of cosmic catastrophe on Earth, which would be on the far side of the moon laying there. Because if it was on the Earth, it would have had eroded already in 10 or 20,000 years, which is why we can't find lots of impact structures on Earth. Earth is a dynamic planet with weather systems. And it is our erosional processes that pretty much erase all the information of our ancient cultures. So we have many levels and information about ancient cultures on Earth that could go back 500,000 years. These are Homo sapiens that look just like you, that talk like you. Well, not in English. Because back prior to 12,000 years ago, we don't even have evidence of language, but we have high culture. That means these people were using communication that was much more advanced than writing. In fact, the Bible even describes how at one point in the past, we all spoke a common language that had no letters. And then it was all broken apart. And then we all didn't understand each other. And that's probably based on truth. Because of the fact there's no evidence on megalithic structures of any language, there probably wasn't any. And this all goes to Occam's razor. There's no need to be a brilliant scientist to understand facts. If it's the most logical and obvious, it's probably that. It's almost 80% or more. That's it. And so how the population can be duped that it's Rick's fault that the Earth is warming is beyond me. It's totally beyond me, because then everyone just has to nod and believe it, and then it becomes indoctrination. It has nothing to do with the fact. Then they create fake science that's called climate science, by the way. I'm a paleoclimatologist. In 1989, you could be a climate scientist only if you were a paleoclimatologist. They were just developing this fake ruse. So the people that knew about climate for millions of years. We didn't study since 1970. That's ridiculous. Why would we spent half of a century figuring out how to get a very fine-tuned picture of Earth's climate through the ice core project. We started with the Vostok data, and we drilled into Iceland because it has 5 miles of ice still. Then we drilled into Greenland, and we got the Greenland Ice Core project and the GISP-2 project, spending billions of your dollars, and then they didn't tell you what it meant. So all the money you paid for taxes to NASA and the federal government for the last 2 decades to drill those holes in the Antarctic, to drill those holes into Greenland, was not so that you could know what happened in your past. Because did they tell you the climate has been up and down for 12,000 years for the last 500,000? No, they told you that it's your fault that it's getting warmer. Does that make any sense? And then the climate science that was invented by the very cabal that we call government, which is now the IPCC, NASA, NOAA, and all the fraud squads that give us fake information. Guess what? There are real people like me and Greg that work there. And Greg probably has to go around his global warming buddies and be like, oh, yeah, be like, grand solar minimum, buddy, and walk away. Because I'm allowed to think like I think, and he's allowed to think like he thinks. And we could disagree.
Amen.
But in the end, we can both worm farm.
That's right.
And that's why Greg's here, because not only is he an insider, but he has solutions. So give it up to NASA insider Greg Allison.
Well, today I'm wearing the red shirt because first I'm going to talk about hell on earth. But then I'm going to turn into Santa Claus and gift you with how we get through it. And it's a heck of a thing to follow Diamond and David. So anyway, here we go. So
can we take pictures of your slides without recording? Just pictures.
Sure.
Yes or no?
Sure, just credit me. That's all. Yeah. Anyway, so let me start my little timer here. Keep up with myself there. There we go. So, and it erased them. There we go. Start out here. Now, like I said, I'm bringing some scary messages here. So I want to assure everyone first that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how tough it is, rest in the comfort of knowledge that there is a silver lining around every mushroom cloud. And so my friends that preceded me talked about the grand cycle of things and all these things and threats we faced. And they talked about what that does in terms of food and the big picture. But I'm going to talk about how it affects our technology, the things we live with on a day-to-day basis, and just how stark that really is, the threats we actually face. And I'm going to look at a lot more of the near-term things. And I do talk about the solar flares and some of the big cycle things, but I'm going to drive in on what are the threats to the power grid? How credible are they? What can it do to you in the end? What can you do about it? And there was this congressional EMP task force that Congress set up that a dozen years ago looked into this and said 9 out of 10 people can die due to societal collapse. And what they were talking about here is what happens when you don't have electrical power. Do you realize electrical power runs the pumps that we use to pump our water, our fuel? That without electrical power, you don't have cash. All our money is digital ones and zeros in the banks. You think the ATM is going to work without electricity? What about the internet? Prescription drugs. How many of you are dependent on prescription drugs? You might better be finding some herbal alternatives or something. Food delivered in the stores. David Devine talked about that. Diamond talked about that. You know, it's not going to be there, and we're just-in-time society today. So, and what I'm going to tell you is the worst news is I don't buy that number. And I'll tell you why. If you go to my YouTube channel, Green Greg's, and look at some of my videos, you'll discover that society is a lot more complex than you can imagine. In my last video talking about, I'm showing a pencil and a number 2 pencil, and you'll discover that farmers are going to starve to death on the farm. See, we've been thinking, well, farmers and rural people will survive. But hey, I've been surveying. I'm finding in my surveys only about 8% of the farmers are growing food. 19% of people are rural, only about 8% are actually growing food, and only maybe 25% of them are growing it on a sustainable basis. Yes?
So what do you think that number is? The number you disagree with?
About 1 in 250, maybe in 3 years. It's right there. And you could adjust it up due to the fact that some people prep and store food, but you're going to have a lot of other things that be driving it down, like the mayhem that you'd face in society. So part of my talk is going to be what we need. We need to prevent this if we can at all do it. So let me come on down here. And we know it don't take long for things to get bad. Look at Katrina. Now, I got like 100 charts, but I'm going to fly through them here. So now I'm going to drive it even deeper. It's worse than you even thought. It's not just you won't have food and all the things they talked about there. So what we're going to talk about here is it could get worse than a nuclear war. That's hard to believe, right? Here's why. In our nuclear power plants, we have spent fuel rods outside of the main containment buildings. So everybody talks about the nuclear reactor. I am going to ignore, for our purposes here, the fact that we have nuclear reactors, what everybody worries about. Let's just talk about the spent fuel rod pools outside the containment buildings. In the United States, there's over 74,000 metric tons of spent fuel rods. That is 280 times more radioactive material than in all the warheads on Earth. That is a very bad number. These fuel rods can burn on contact with air. Those fuel pools evaporate 160 gallons of water a minute that has to be pumped on those fuel rods. Now, they're about 20 foot deep, so you got a little margin before it evaporates off. And, the nuclear plants have backup generators. They have batteries there that will last, for a few hours, and the backup diesel generators. Backup diesel generators require fuel too. The fuel has to get to them. Electric pumps aren't working. See, trucks aren't rolling because you got problems with the fuel pumps where they're getting their fuel. A lot of things are starting to unravel. And if you can get that going, the parts, the supply chain, it keeps that industry moving. Anybody here ever drove a truck? Is there any truck drivers in the room? You got any family that's driven trucks? How long can you maintain a truck, sir, without parts? Not long, right? Take spare parts. Those things are in maintenance all the time. So in the supply chain, it's just in time too. And by the way, it uses computers these days. Remember some of us remember when you go to the parts places and they had big books? Show me that today. There's not so much of that. So we're just waiting basically. Next chart's on that. I will skip most of that. That's some of the science behind it. This is back to your 280 times the radiation you'd expect to get out of a full-scale nuclear war. Just sitting around our backyards waiting on the lights to go out. Just sitting around, and now we're going to talk about the lights going out. See, they don't tell you this. Even if people talk about power grid defense, seldom tell you this story. It's just too darn scary. So that's why I'm wearing the red. Besides, it also shows up better in this dark room, but that's another story. So how could this happen? Could it happen? What's the likelihood of this? Well, we're going to start out with root causes here, and we'll talk about the probability of these root causes. As we all know, and we've heard talked about here today, the solar coronal mass ejections, but there's more than that. There's electromagnetic pulse. This would happen from a high-altitude detonation of a nuclear weapon. There are direct kinetic attacks where somebody could actually attack substations and take the grid down. We all have heard of cyber attacks. Even the Neill earthquake zone could cause a probability. Then NASA had done an estimate that we could have about a 12% per year, 12% per decade chance of a CME taking us down. But that's based on things being the way they've been. That's not based on, they're looking at Carrington events, and they're looking at how it has been historically. Well, I think you've already heard here today that the Earth's magnetic field is dropping in field strength rapidly. That's our shields that protect us from this stuff. Without those shields, we're more vulnerable than ever. So what I'm here to tell you is that we have a high vulnerability today. And if you look at this Carrington event, we all hear about the Carrington event, how it started fires in telegraph stations. This was a serious event. And this happened in 1859. And so most of these calculations are based on the Carrington event. Then we had a railroad event in 1921. Now, yeah, we had some power then, but we didn't have the high voltage power transformers that we have today. Those would be vulnerable that even this event would take them out if we had the magnetic field that we had back then, which we don't. And then in 1989, the Hydro-Quebec event took out power in Quebec and also burned one of those high voltage transformers in Salem, Massachusetts, of all places. I guess I don't want to burn a witch. I don't know. David Dubai made me think of that, talking about burning witches in bad times. Let's hope that we don't see bad times like that, because I'll be one of the first guys that'll be trying to spring up the burn, right? So, and we had a near miss just in 2012. A CME as powerful as a Carrington event was streamed. There's the sun. The sun shoots these things off in different directions, like shooting cannonballs. And they're very big cannonballs, as you'll see in a moment. But fortunately, we've missed this one, and a lot of them miss us. Most of them don't hit us directly, even though they're very large. So, and we've heard some discussion about solar flares. It has been suggested by some that the reason we have a Fermi paradox is once a civilization reaches a technical level, the solar flare and from their sun will take them out. That could be take them down. And you should see one of my recent videos when I go into the fragility of our civilization on my YouTube channel, Green Ridge. You need to go there and look at that. But so we had an event in 660 BC, stronger than the Carrington event, 900 AD, 5 times stronger. And then Diamond mentioned this one. He talked about this one, the Charlemagne event. He and Rex were finding some evidence for this out in the desert. 10 times stronger than the Carrington event, 774 to 775 AD. This is where they were drawing. The Squatter Man, more recently or something, they saw some centipede or whatever it was. But this thing was very strong, and it produced, we wouldn't survive that with our technical civilization today. And this is a CME, and you can see the Earth here by comparison to that. Well, I'm going to show you some scarier shots here. Look at that. You wouldn't even see Earth on that photograph. Just take David's pictures for example. Thank you, David. I appreciate those. You know, Earth wouldn't even, there's not a speck on that screen big enough. You know, maybe a pixel. So, and look at this. And by the way, when you say these shots with this covering the sun, and so they can photograph this stuff, the actual size of the sun is within that circle there. And Diamond showed this photograph, I believe. But you can see these are seriously large events, and the sun does kick them out. The sun, just operating normally, does things that threatens our technical civilization. And so that's just the sun side. But mankind poses maybe even a bigger threat, possibly to our power grid and immediacy. I don't know. The sun is going to get us eventually if we don't do something. That eventually may not be long with our decrease in magnetic field strength. But an electromagnetic pulse is where you have a nuke weapon detonated in high enough in altitude, or you can generate them other means too, in smaller scale regions. But everybody thinks you need a big nuke. No. Actually, what you want to do is maximize production of gamma rays out of your nuclear device. So the bigger nukes have shielding, but they're so big and massive, they actually block some of the gamma rays. So it turns out that the ideal nuke is probably about 300 kilotons. Just exactly what North Korea started out testing, by the way. It's not the bigger nukes. It's the smaller nukes that are the ideal. Besides, that makes them easier to orbit on satellites and things like that. So you have to watch that. Now, today we have all these tensions in the South China Sea, Russia, Ukraine, Syria. Now it's ramping up all over the place. I actually made this chart some time back. Of course, now we're having some high tensions with Iran, as you all know. North Korea is coming back online in the tension index. But we can have terrorist groups attack us. You know, there was a story told a couple of decades back about 80 or so backpack nukes that the Russians had lost. That they'd hit some pre-position in the United States. They don't know what happened to them. What are these things? Where are they at? And I've heard other rumors. So how could a small group actually pull off something, a technological achievement like that? How could they? I've had people tell me that a small group of people could not, a terrorist organization could not make a delivery of a system like that. Okay, you believe that? I'm going to tell you something. That's me 20 years ago. This is my little group here developing a hybrid rocket in the garage. This rocket hit space. That's our avionics shop. We did this on a shoestring budget. We all were just part-time workers, just a handful of us. And 40 years prior to us doing this, it took a superpower to achieve what we were doing. Now you can do this with less today. Here we are. on NASA's Pearl River barge out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. That's my SL-2 rocket, which today hangs in Straightdale Brewery in Huntsville, Alabama. And that's our balloon. You can come see that rocket. And what we found was it's a lot easier to launch a balloon from the deck of a ship because you can move with the wind. And that's what we did. In fact, we were able to calculate exactly by knowing the wind's a lot, prepositioning our boat. I could have that rocket at a point in the sky that I wanted to when I released that balloon. Everybody thinks, well, balloons go here, there, and yonder. No, I could, on a moving deck of a boat, start my balloon inflation, know where that boat was going in. And when I finished my inflation and I released the balloon, then I would know where it would be when I wanted to fire that rocket. So if I wanted that rocket launched from a certain point in space, I just adjusted to where I started my run with the boat. We were good at that. This is my balloon launch return vehicle. That's Tim Pickens in the picture there. That's a subscale test of it right here at UAH. I also went to school at UAH, and yeah, I've met Spencer and all those guys. Christy, this is a subscale ground launch. This is it hanging from a balloon. Been launched out in the Gulf of Mexico off of the C. Michael Calais. And there on the deck of the C. Michael Calais, and that little tuft of hair is me, and I got my hand up on it, letting it go. And this is my cat's prize rocket. I did this just, I was cranking these things out over and over and over. And I might show you a video on the cat's prize rocket if I don't time out, which I might do. I don't know. If I get time, I might show you that. But this is in October 2000. I mean, we're talking 20 years ago we were doing these things. This rocket's 17.5 foot long. And we developed our own avionics. Just a group of guys working on the side. We developed, designed, and built our own boards. You didn't have all the stuff in the cell phones like you do today. But we came up, that's the antennas we put on the system. We came up with the means to defeat the COCOM limit so we could use civilian type GPS for our missile tracking. The big countries and groups weren't supposed to be able to do that. That's why they had that. Well, we plowed right through it. So if we could do that, who couldn't? As our launcher avionics. I'm not sure. We built 4 ground stations. And we did all this on a small budget, by the way. So this gets you, by the way, this is a space explosion known as Starfish Prime of a nuke being detonated in space. It was launched on a Redstone rocket. Those were developed in Huntsville, Alabama. I'll work on the Redstone arsenal. That's where NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center is at. That's a ground-based burst. That's what most people are more familiar with looking at. When they did this out in the South Pacific, they had effects in Hawaii that they noticed. This is where they started getting interested in EMP once they discovered what that thing did. Now, this shows you per various altitude. This shows you how much destruction you would get in the United States from a EMP. It's from space. Yeah, in Canada, Mexico. Now, this is per altitude. Now, see, my balloons go 20 miles high. So if I didn't use a rocket, just coming right off of a balloon, I could cover this much area. So if I put this over the Northeast, I could take out 100 million people right there. I've already done the delivery systems 20 years ago. Backpack nuclear would do it. Now, I wouldn't do this, but I'm just telling you and showing you. Santa Claus is not going to take down your power grid. I'm here trying to get you guys aware that it can be taken down, and we've got to stop this. And you get all these people. I've heard some people, no, it can't be done. There's no way they would do this. Oh, yeah, I could have done it 20 years ago. I'm telling you that. Me. I could have done it. But I didn't do it, and I'm not going to do it. I'm trying to stop it. So, and that's why I'm here. When I was in that garage working on these rockets, realizing superpowers could do this kind of stuff, and it took superpowers to do stuff that we were doing, it kind of led me to rapid thought experiment. And what I thought was this. If we can do this today, what will be available 20, 30, 40 years from now? Are we going to be basically giving weapons of mass destruction capability to any group that wants it? I mean, like an atom bomb in every pot instead of a chicken in every pot. That's where we're going. Technological proliferation will take us there. What does that mean amongst ourselves as a society? One, it means we better learn how to get along. Right now, we're fanning war and hatred all over the world. We will not survive doing that. We have to find, and the government's not going to solve that problem for us because they live and make their living through a military industrial complex that's funded on the basis of you got to worry about the guys on the other side. And they do the same thing conversely with their people. That's how these big governments justify their existence. That's how they justify taking all your money and that and other similar scams they put upon us. So we've got to find ways for people to reach out directly. You can go anywhere in the world. You can go to China. You can go to Iran. You can go to Russia. I enjoyed Moscow. I've been there. David lives in China. And David, correct me if I'm wrong. Anywhere you can go in the world, when you meet the people, the direct people, the people are the same anywhere in the world. You find good people all over the world. People there are just like us here in Africa. And people want basically the same kind of things. David, am I lying? Thank you. It's the organizations that derive their strength through running games on us that pit us against each other. They make a lot of money doing that. And we've got to figure out how to bust through that and go person to person. We need to just say, hey, we don't need you guys anymore. I got a plan for that. That's coming up later. So I'm talking tomorrow. I'll show a quick picture maybe that day. Kim Jong-un, he launched his satellite in April 2013. It flew over Washington, D.C. I'll show some more stuff about that in a moment. The KMS-3 satellite could potentially carry a nuke big enough to cause an EMP. James Oberg, who's one of the few, he's the only American aerospace engineer and journalist who's ever been to North Korea to see anything. They brought him in there to show him, we're not launching a weapon. They showed him a satellite, but they would not show him putting that satellite on the bird they launched. So he was not a happy camper. He did not come back and venerate them because he said, they wouldn't let me see what to put on it. Scary. Oh, yeah. This notion where you don't use a ballistic missile to carry something, but you just do it from a satellite, it's called fractional orbital bombardment. The Russians come up with that concept. And by the way, Russians said that they gave, when the wall fell, Russian generals admitted giving EMP superweapon technology to the North Koreans. Technology, but 200,000 volts per kilometer on your power grid. And this was testified by a former NASA temporary director named William Abrams. I'm getting brain lock right now, but he testified this. It's a congressional record, so I'm not giving you classified information. It would have been classified if he hadn't put the congressional record. Something happened interesting though on 16 April. This one, the satellite flew over Washington D.C. and some other things happened on that date. Sometime around that time frame, that the North Korean tramp freighter, the Chung Gang, was steaming around in the Gulf of Mexico. We caught it on the way back through the Panama Canal, and we looked under the bags of sugar they had in there. We found two fully assembled missile launchers and shipping crates underneath the bags of sugar. So they had been in the Gulf of Mexico, just steaming around. And 16 April of 2013, something else happened. The Metcalf Power Substation, and that would serve the San Jose area where a lot of our internet stuff comes out of, in California, was apparently hit by a dry run practice attack where somebody went in with the AK-47s and they shot up a few very key components, but not enough to quite take it down, and placed up their ammo and got out of there. Those people have not been captured or identified to this date. Who did that? See, that's scary. This is called a kinetic attack. You've all heard of cyber attacks. That's for your Metcalf station. PG&E. We heard about them in the California fires, right? Yeah, they're not exactly popular these days. But the thing is, small teams with AK-47s. Now, I'm not going to tell you, nor do I directly know which 9 substations it is, but it's been reported already, and it's in the media, so I'm not giving you classified information, that there are 9 critical substations the United States have taken out, would take down our whole power grid. And somebody told the head of the Iranian Revolutionary National Guard that, by the way, it is in their military doctrine, if they have war in the United States, to take out our power grid. And theoretically, they plan to do it by an EMP. I don't know what their capacity is in that regards, but we do know they launched a satellite. So, but the Iranian National Guard leader said, hey, I've already targeted 20. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the precipice of perhaps some ugly situations with Iran as we're sitting here and talking here today. This could happen an hour from now, 2 hours from now, or 20 years from now. I don't know. Let's hope it don't happen in the next few minutes. But what I'm telling you is we are susceptible. This could come upon us. Of course, I'm not going to delay. I'm not going to talk about cyber attack. But if you hadn't, who has not heard of cyber attacks? Raise your hand. Thank you. No point in covering that. We have 3 electrical grids in the United States. This is how it works. You've got power generation systems. Then you have these really large step up and step down transformers that are there to kick that power up to as much as 750,000 volts. They transfer this power long distances by doing that to end users, homes, and factories. And sometimes you have little step downs at the factories too, like here, some in the intermediate area there. Now the picture depicting the same kind of thing. And here's these big transformers. And this is there's 2 things that's most fundamental in our power grid. There's a supervisory control and data acquisition computers that are like, I don't know who in here might be familiar with, Yeah, well, the SCADAs, that's what they're, okay, good. Those are vulnerable, and but you can shield those to some degree and replace them and have some in Faraday cages. But the biggest, hardest to replace thing is high voltage power transformers. Why? Because they're huge. Some of them are as big as a house. They weigh 200 to 400 tons, and the coils are hand wound. It takes good craftsmen to do this. South Africa lost some of these in an electrical storm. They thought, well, we'll just build our own, and the ones they built didn't last but 3 years. Look, it takes major infrastructure to move them. There's only like I don't know, I think 6 to maybe 12 of these big flat cars in the United States that can move these things. And look at the trucks required. That's a small one there. Yeah, this is what it takes to move these things. That is a rare piece of equipment. So it takes the time you place an order, and to place an order, you're going to require the internet, right? How are you going to do that with the power down? And how are you going to have money when all your digital money's gone? So you got to have money. You got to be a place. By the time you place an order, it takes 18 months to receive at the ship dock that transformer. And by the way, most of them are being built overseas, although they are starting up a small manufacturing capacity for these by the Hyundai, South Korean company, in Montgomery, Alabama. Oh, by the way, I'm trying to get Alabama to harden its power grid. And so when we harden our power grid in Alabama, this will be Bama Nation. So you better all learn how to say y'all or get your grid hardened. If that ain't leverage to get you moving, I don't know what is. So anyway, this is another look at some of the nuclear power plants and prevalent winds, where you may be downwind from these things. So I'm not going to go into my local plant. This is one of the cooling rods. You see the blue, that's from the radiation in the rod, in the tank. Now what you have is you have these fuel pellets, individual fuel pellets, uranium. They assemble them into a rod. It's clad with zirconium alloy, zircaloy they call it. That stuff gets, when it's in reactors, it gets infused with hydrogen and oxygen and will burn on contact with air when it's hot. This is a depiction of a nuclear plant. Here's your reactor. Now here's your reactor. Here they're moving the stuff in and out. And this is your containment building. And over here with just a sheet metal roof is your typical storage pool, which is depicted here. That's what happened to the ones in Fukushima. Look, those sheet metal roofs covering the spent fuel rod storage pools just weren't up to much, were they? Fortunately, the whole national infrastructure didn't go down. They were able to maintain pumper trucks and things to keep water pumped on those fuel rods. Thankfully to that. Yeah, and here's where our nuclear power plants are located. That's a little better depiction showing what they consider the keep out zones where you got to run for them. I live right inside this one, right about there. Yeah, I'm not exactly happy with that. So I have some interest in maintaining cooling for these plants. We had a nuclear power plant at Fort Greely, Alaska, and one of my best friends buried that reactor core in what's supposed to be a couple million year stable mountain range there. His name's Ed Kiker, and he lives in Huntsville, Alabama now. And I met him at Fort Greely, Alaska in 1981 in April when I lived there for 2 years. Yes?
What's the rate of accumulation of the spent fuel rods per annum?
This is what this chart shows right here. We produce 2,000 metric tons of highly irregular waste each year. So you can work that back to any rate you want. And we're filling these pools to capacity. Perfect. You asked a question when I had the chart up. And here's one of these backup generators that you got to worry about. These guys putting some kind of filter on there. Yeah, that's not your biggest problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, when this goes down, the cavalry's not coming in to save us. Just not going to have that happening. We see how ugly things have gotten. And this is 3 days in Katrina. 3 days and things was going unglued in New Orleans. What happens when your problem is for years? Now, see, we had in Huntsville, Alabama, in 26th April, the entire North Alabama, 26th April 2011, we had a string of tornadoes. We had all day long tornadoes coming through. And at EF5 just passed about a mile south of my house. This was the day after my earthworms arrived. I started my earthworm farm. I called them my little red ones. I call them little red twisters now. And so that's when I was getting my earthworm farm started up, a worm farm. And we were out of power for, I don't know, they got us restored pretty fast over a week. But see, we had bucket trucks coming. I went up the highway to find me some generators to keep my aquaponics system running. I had to go all the way to Kentucky to find the generators. And by the time I got back, my fish were dead. I mean, so my aquaponics system collapsed then because everybody was going after everything. But imagine if there are no other places to go to. The whole power grid is out everywhere. Like I said, we had bucket trucks just streaming down the interstate as I was driving north, coming down to help us out. We had a lot of people coming from all over the country to help us get going again. If it's nationwide, everybody's going to be worried about their own. It's not going to happen. And so what can we do? We can add surge blockers to the center taps of those big high voltage transformers in series, a bunch of them in series. That's one thing that you can do. And in fact, they should just start doing that right now, as far as I'm concerned. You use a lot of Faraday cages on a lot of your simple sensitive equipment like the SCADAs, and then build them per mil standard, or at least put them in a mil standard box to protect them from surges and things like that, and have a backup one. I was in the Army when I was at Fort Greely, which I mentioned. At the time, I was in the Coal Regions Test Center, but I got out and went to the National Guard. And when I was before I went to grading, and they taught us there about nuclear defense and things like that. And they told us we had to have radio sets completely unconnected. Even though the boxes were built with Faraday cages and all your cables were built, per standard, that wouldn't help you. You couldn't even have the connectors close to them because the pulse would jump the connector. And switching something off, if you got a contact switch enough, because you'd get an arc over. That arc over would jump over and fry your stuff. Now, I've seen people selling little bitty rinky-dink boxes telling you it's going to protect your home. Ha, 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 ha. With little bitty wires and little bitty components, heavily potted, so you can't tell what's in them. That's hilarious. They might give a high voltage if it's a very low current, but you're going to get both high voltage and high current with this. If you can burn power lines, if you can burn telegraph wires, how is that stuff going to protect you? It's not. But I'll digress with that. The reason I'm bringing this up with the military systems and what we were taught is that's what you need to do with some of your more sensitive items of equipment for your grid, for your SCADAs and things like that. You might want to take your computers that control your vehicles and buy another one and put it in a Faraday cage. The Faraday cage is just a metal enclosure that keeps the radio waves out, because if you take a metal sphere, all the electrical charge will be on the outside of it. That's just the way it'll all go to the outside. That's how a what do you call them, big ball generators, the getting my brain locked sometimes. Huh? Van de Graaff, thank you. Van de Graaff generators. Yeah, the Van de Graaff generators work that way. All the charge goes to the outside of the sphere. And so, and that's per Gauss law. Gauss law claims things like that. I'm an electrical engineer. That's what I studied in college at UAH, by the way. And my daughter's at UAH now. She's going to be a senior. So, there are a lot of things that you can do. We need to have backup means to pump water for these plants. We need backup means to get fuel to the power plants. States need to recognize, and I've briefed this at Montgomery to the head of our EMA. Our EMA director in Alabama, Brian Hastings, I've talked with him, I've briefed him and a whole bunch of other people, including Special Projects Coordinator for our Governor Kay Ivey, and our Public Services Commission Chair, Twinkle Kavanaugh is her name, and several others. I briefed these people on this. I've had 2 power grid defense conferences in Huntsville, and they're becoming aware of this. But we're going to need National Guard escorts to keep the fuel running. But they're going to have logistics planning and maintain the spare parts to keep them running for a time. This needs to be run for 10 years. Maybe the best thing to do, unfortunately, most of these plants are on rivers, is to get fuel barges parked at the nuclear power plants. But then you have to guard them to keep. What was Mad Max all about? When you need National Guard escorts for fuel trucks, you ever seen Mad Max? And Mad Max, the whole theme is get the fuel truck, right? That's going to be a precious commodity. Well, that may sound hot, Greg, that was science fiction. That's funny. It's already happening in Venezuela. It's already happening in Venezuela. So that is something that goes on. It's not made up, contrived. That's a real concern. We got to develop resilience. I can't talk today. Resiliency of our power grid. Microgrids are a way to go. Home base. Let's get off the grid as much stuff as we can. Let's just take it down. Why don't we power the man, the guys that people don't even care about us, the big centralized system. Let's decentralize as much as we can. Low cost fixings. A lot of these solutions are not really that expensive in the grand scheme of things. We're talking about the cost maybe of a B-2 bomber, or maybe 20 cents per month added to a utility bill if they choose that way. Or maybe they could work it in as a small piece of the infrastructure bills they're talking about funding. Now, I do know that General Quast at the Air Force's Air University, it seems strange to me that a school in Air University would be leading the charge on this, but I'm glad somebody's doing it. He's had 2 conferences now. One was up in Maryland, the last one just a few months ago in Montgomery, Alabama, thankfully. I'm telling you, it's going to be Bama Nation. Anyway, he is driving an effort to push micro nukes at the military stations, all the military bases. Right now, the military bases get most of the power off the civilian grid. Like I said, hey, yeah, we buried a reactor core at Fort Greeley. But what that buys us, though, is that they could also, these aren't like the big nuke stations that we're doing today. They don't require the kind of cooling. They won't go into meltdown. They don't have the kind of threats that the older style facilities put upon us. And microgrids are a better way to manage our power grid anyway. But these could help. You realize a nuclear power plant to restart it, they can't restart themselves. They don't even provide the power they use inside, so they don't balance out the grid and everything. They have to have another power plant to start. Basically, you have to have a coal fire plant to start a nuke plant. Oh, we just took our coal power plants offline, didn't we? Holy smoke, cause they were going to give us global warming. By the way, I do promote global warming. So, yeah, I'm thinking about starting an organization and calling it the Glacial Interlude Preservation Society, GIPS. If you join, you'll be a Gipper. Yeah, we'll propose to strip mine West Virginia and set the whole coal fields on fire. Just kidding. I'm an environmentalist, actually. It was sort of just a different sort. I don't buy into the mainstream media stuff. So, so there was a presidential executive order. Trump's been saying, hey, we got to do something. But his executive order calls for studies. And yeah, you do need to start out with some studies. But there's things that we could be doing right now. Like I said, going to them high voltage transformers and start putting in those surge blockers. Go to the some of your more critical assets, have spares, have Faraday cages. Go to Blackout Wars, written by Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, who's spoken to in my conferences. And he talks about low-hanging fruit methods to take care of some of these things. And, there's just the biggest thing I worry about, though, is that the power grid industry is fighting this tooth and nail at every corner we turn. And so this they blocked this at the federal level because they had one key subcommittee member who wouldn't pass this out of the subcommittees, blocked it in Congress. So we've taken it on to try to address this at the state level. And they're trying to follow around to keep a lot of the states from doing what they ought to do.
Why would they block it?
Money spent, changing things. There's just various and sundry reasons. Of course, maybe they want to vote the Georgia Guidestones on us. I don't know. So, but the good news is that one of the things you could do is work with your local EMA. One of my speakers at my conferences was Ambassador Cooper, Hank Cooper. He'd been head of the Strategic Defense Initiative at one time under Reagan. But he actually went to the EMA community in South Carolina. Says you need to practice a realistic grid down, not one of these 1 or 2 day exercises. They're typically, you always hear they're doing a grid down exercise, but it's always a scenario like it's a day or 2 or 3. Yeah, really, we're talking years. And so he said, practice a real one where you're not getting help from the outside. When you really lose power, what are you really going to do? So they went through the exercise, and all the lower ranking guys in this, they said, my God, we can't deal with this. And they started complaining back to their upper management, said this can't be dealt with. Our hands are full. We've got to harden the grid. And based on this, Duke Power that covers North and South Carolina is looking into hardening and taking steps now to harden the power grid. There is a spark of hope. And this is what people like yourselves could get involved in your communities. Another thing you could do is you could write your local, actually, the federal level politicians are the most corrupt. A lot of times you'll find some state level people who are, especially the ones that aren't lawyers. Like I've got one in my, I've got one, we have my state representative, my state senator is actually a pharmacist. And he's actually come and participated with our committees. He's on board. So if you work through some of you might find his predecessor, who he preceded previously, was totally bought into the system, totally corrupted by it. Fortunately, we got rid of him. We put Tom Butler back in the spot. So if you find the right people, you might look out, find people you can work with at the state level, people you can work at, even at the federal level from time to time. So don't give up. And there's organizations you can join. I'll show some more on that in a little bit, but that just shows you. I mean, look, guys, the universe is vast. It's a wondrous place. And I really think that it's our holy mission in life to appreciate and wonder the universe. Through us, the universe has eyes and ears so it can comprehend and see itself and adore its beauty. That's a holy mission that we have. And we don't know how many others that there are or are not out there to participate, be co-participants in this adornment of the universe. So that's what we need to do. This is what I wanted to see. I want to see us moving out into space in a big way. And we could. Do you realize that if we don't botch it here in the next few years, the future could be mind-boggling if we can get through and figure our way through the hurdles that's right in our face, like if Iran don't EMP us or in the next few days or something. David talked about this. He talked about all kinds of opportunities over here. And they are there. And it can be mind-boggling. But you will have to know how to position yourself, take care of it. No matter what, we're going to face some difficulties ahead, with or without an EMP or a solar flare. And we could harden our grid. Now, it may take time. The problem is, do we have enough time? I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you that we're going to get it all fixed. I do know there's some people trying to fix it. I know these people. I also know there's people that are fighting us. So look at this. This is a notion for something called a vernal sphere. It's round. Greg got his houses on the ceiling. How are they doing that? Well, it's rotating to provide artificial gravity. This is like a giant inside-out world with trees and houses and rivers inside. Could it be done? Yes, this is a different version called the Stanford Torus. It gets it out over a wider diameter, so you're a mile across, so you can rotate just 1 RPM with the same kind of slice of light right through the center. Most of our planet, if you think about it, our planet is 8,000 miles thick. But we live on such a thin veneer of the surface of it, it's unbelievable. Do you occupy a mile of the surface? No. You occupy a few feet. I guess 8,000 miles, that's something. So a planet is an inefficient way to organize, to have cities and life and things like that. If you could reorganize, like say, asteroids and build the hulls of vessels like this, you could house 1 trillion people in our solar system, several trillion, just off the asteroids. Moons of outer planets. You could have worlds and millions of Mozarts and millions of Einsteins. This is inside of Stanford tourists. This is different. This is called the O'Neill space colony concept. These concepts, this was done based on using bridge building technology. And these concepts were for counter-rotating cylinders that would be 20 miles long, 4 miles in diameter. And that's supposed to be, I don't know, San Francisco Bridge or something in there. Golden Gate Bridge, excuse me. And this is the idea of looking down the length of one. They've got this concept. At this time, this was drawn in the 70s. Had alternating mirror window and land regions with big mirrors outside reflecting the sunlight. Here they're showing an eclipse being reflected back inside, so it's kind of dark and they're having a solar eclipse. The artist got quite creative on that. But we could have many beautiful worlds in space. We could take our heavy industry off Earth and relocate it to space. And this has been a vision from O'Neill's time. It's been recently talked to very well by Jeff Bezos, believe it or not, in one of his Blue Origin talks when he was introducing his lunar lander concept. Yeah, so Jeff Bezos is kind of like a double-sided coin. He's got that Amazon take over the world, and everybody's going to be a little minion side, but then he's got this other side to him. It's like, wow. I mean, that was a very interesting video he put out on that. So, in long term, though, huh?
Don't trust him.
We don't trust him.
I didn't say I trusted him. If you've seen my videos on my channel, I got spanked for saying, hey, should we even trust Trump? You know, I got spanked. I had a lot of people unsubscribe to me for putting that out there. I said, is Trump an agent of the deep state? Hey, I just asked a question. I mean, look, he's all for prosecuting Julian Assange. What's that all about? And they've been holding a carrot in front of us for years of QAnon and everything that's going to happen. I don't see squat happening or any sign it's ever going to happen. I don't know. I just asked a question. Oh my God! You'd think I had. You'd think the Thunderbolts project, the concepts were aimed at me, and all that thunder was coming on top of my head. All right, so our life is about the choices we make, what we do with it. I choose to fight to preserve our power grid. So, hey, look, I'm a prepper. You're not supposed to admit that, right? But in my videos, I talk about what to do when they come for your food and all these kind of things. And check out my Green Greg channel. I cover a lot of topics. How to grow your own stuff, how to take care of it. And I cover growing microgreens. David Devine talks about a lot in his videos. I'm raising food in my home. I got a greenhouse. I do aquaponics. I do raised bed gardening. And I got a concept I'm working up I'm going to talk about tomorrow, which is an answer to a lot of this stuff for survivability. But, hey, what do you want? You want a bright future or hell on earth? Do you want the devil or do you want Santa Claus? There you go. Well, I'd rather be Santa Claus than the devil any day. Anyway, well, I don't know, the devil might have some fun of his own, but I'm not going to talk this right now, but this is a concept for a habitat that you can live out of, make a living out of, and grow all your food indoors in a walled compound that could serve as a nice fortress. It has lots of thermal mass. You build it on the dirt you built it for the most part, and you can grow practically all your food right here. And I'll cover that at the end of my talk tomorrow. This is just a teaser to get you interested.
Yeah.
And the key things in this habitat concept, it's like an Earthship on steroids. It's scaled up for more growing area. But the key principles, I'm not quite the Nazi they are with some of the Earthship things, but some aspects of that. But the key parameters for this concept are growing area and thermal mass. That's the two key things for this concept. And, oh, by the way, this can be modified slightly for a space habitat and can be radiation proof. Yes?
Oh, when you finish that thought, I have a question.
Ask.
Okay, so the EMA and Fema have actually a bad reputation amongst this crowd.
Yeah.
So
Well
can
deserved.
you speak to that as an insider?
What's really going on?
Okay, when you go to these agencies, usually at the ground level, the working Joes, you get a lot of good people there. A lot of them care about their jobs. You go to the FBI, even the CIA, even them. The working stiffs are usually good people. But as they go up the organization, they say it floats, right?
Yeah.
And once it floats, it gets up the level where the politics gets involved and other things, the control masters. So let me tell you about 3-letter agencies while we're at it. And this has been talked to by Diamond and maybe David a little bit too. These 3-letter agencies have a revolving door where the organizations are supposed to regulate. We created all these agencies supposedly to protect us from this, to protect us from that, right?
They're in cahoots.
Yeah, they're in cahoots, absolutely. So what happens is this guy sitting over here in a 3-letter agency working, he's wanting to retire, but he knows he can get that government retirement check, but what's he want to do then? He's going to go work for the same company he regulated. Now, how hard do you think he's going to be on that company? And the guys from those companies, in order to get to make themselves look bigger as they go up their board of directors and go up in elevation, they try to get some time with the government. So that it revolves. It's a revolving door. And then they have shared boards. And David will tell you about that. They've got shared boards of directors. They're intertwined. And if you've ever been to Washington, D.C., do you know where K Street is?
Yeah, I live there.
Is K Street not one of the strongest built up, most active places in what? That's where all the lobbyists are, my friends. K Street. Yeah, and I've been to K Street. I've been to meetings on K Street. I have run the halls of Congress myself, actually, promoting space. But if what's happening in K Street is these guys are there for the industry. They go into all these politicians. They're what corrupts the politicians. The politicians get their money, their funding, and from these big companies. And these big companies also own the news media. Then all the local news media have been bought up by these big conglomerates, and these conglomerates are getting bought. Now, if you think Fox News is going to give you the truth, maybe you're on the conservative side of the coin. Guess what? Fox News just got bought out by Mickey Mouse. Same organization owns ABC. So I don't believe anything you get out of the mainstream news media. Don't believe any of it.
So what is?
I mean, have you heard anything on the mainstream news media about anything you've heard here today or anything you'll hear this weekend? No. What?
So yeah,
A FEMA.
Yeah.
Well, again, some of the lower level people in FEMA are out there to help communities in emergencies, but they're kind of understaffed for that. What's their bigger overall purpose? There's a lot of debate about that. I don't know the answer. I'm not a member of FEMA. Somebody told me FEMA's been run by a bunch of guys from Alabama lately, so I don't know. You better watch it. What I said about Bama Nation earlier, right? I think I'm about to time out here. Yes.
How many of our current utility companies throughout the U.S. or North America are foreign owned?
I don't think they are, except maybe at the lower level. So what you have is the big companies produce the energy and they distribute to a lot of little distributors. Where I live is actually government owned. It's TVA. That's a kind of a government corporation. You have Alabama Power. You've got Duke Power in the Carolinas. You get a lot of corporate PG&E. Now that one may be partially. There's been allegations of foreign influences on that one in particular. So are people on their board of directors from some of these other entities? Possibly. Are they trying to serve some bigger agenda? Possibly. I'm in the world of speculation, so I'm not going to go any
The
further.
reason I'm asking this because I was the director of construction support for
For who?
Flora.
Flora.
Flora Daniel. Flora,
Okay.
Flora Daniel.
Yeah.
And of course, two of the big power plant projects in South Carolina and Georgia, Toshiba and Westinghouse. Toshiba was heavily involved in that and went broke.
Wow.
So there is more foreign ownership in a lot of our utilities and infrastructure than what people know.
That's scary. That is scary. Guys, look, we're in tension right now with China. China owns a lot of our bonds. They're invested heavily in the United States.
They own a lot of our toll roads too.
Yeah. How do we deal with that? What happens if we get in a conflict? So there's a lot of things to think about. But there is hope. We are descendants of survivors. I'm going to tell you that. We're all descendants of survivors. Even though I showed up here, you might have a situation where like only, you know, it's a very small percentage survive. Yes. Speak up. I'm practically deaf. Oh yeah, they could but they got to have. It's not so much the plants themselves in that case. Yeah, those will be operable. The nuke plants will not be. Huh? Well, they can operate. However, they got to be able to transmit that power. And with the lack of high voltage power transformers, that's going to be hard to do. Although some local grids might be inoperable, especially in my region, maybe. Yeah, we're set up to have Bama Nation, guys. So that's why you probably want to get your grids a little stronger. Oh, I don't want Alabama taking over my state. All right, thank you. Oh yeah, do check out my YouTube channel, Green with Space Grex, 1G, no apostrophe, and I love alliteration. Galactic Grex, 1G, no apostrophe. That's the Space channel. It's very new, and that's my homestead and survival and how to grow your own stuff channel. Thank you.
Farmer is experiencing an emergency today.
Running for governor of
He was at the
Who
hotel.
is?
He'll be here tomorrow.
You are?
And I don't know what that emergency is.
I live in Alaska.
I know, I want to talk to
He's
you.
okay.
All right, cool.
He was here. He had to leave. So he'll be back tomorrow, so there's no talking.
Oh, our next speaker's gone?
Maybe we should have open mic. Open mic.
Just don't touch the live stream.
Just don't touch. Get up there and say whatever you guys say.
I'm a big fan of all you guys. I'm going to try not to be blubbering. I'm trying to figure out a sustainable aquaponics system where I don't want to have to be putting food in for the fish. I want to be able to feed them worms and like grass clippings.
Well,
Have you figured out a sustainable a fish?
You might be able to
that
feed
is-
grass clippings possibly
or
to
food scraping.
tilapia are a vegetarian fish.
Yeah.
Now, all the fish I'm raising right now are carnivores, so you could feed them worms. I do have a worm farm, but you can also feed them fish food and things like that, or the insects.
But during the zombie apocalypse, you're not going to be able to go buy fish.
Oh, no,
food.
no,
Yeah,
you're not.
You need a pelletizer. So we take all of the sweepings from any grain or any grain. You can use grass clippings with the nutrient-dense product that you grind up.
Yeah.
You pelletize it, and you have fish food.
Yeah.
Fish food is
But
pelletized
that will be
garbage
good
from the
for
ground.
the tilapia.
Yeah.
And tilapia, though, they like it warm,
Plants.
so you got to be able to keep your greenhouse warm.
They just feed it.
So,
I'm working in my basement because I
Must be
have a
vegetarian
very
food.
tiny property.
oh, basement's a great place now for
Will it be
aquaponics.
warm
You
enough?
can
Digest.
grow.
Enough for the
Well, you can
tilapia?
grow tilapia in there.
Okay.
So, start how to stop this.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
I don't mean to. Can you tell me if you build
The animal.
with rebar with that, can you build a Faraday cage out of an insulated concrete floor?
You'd have to put like screen wire in there or something like that. Or you got to have a tight metal mesh where the size of the metal grid is smaller than the wavelength you're trying to stop.
So the rebar that's.
Yeah, the short wave is going to get through that. I didn't talk about E1, E2, and E3. There are a lot of things I didn't talk about.
So you need a mesh,
Or solid metal.
like a trash can?
Yeah, but put an insulator in the bottom and like a wooden block and put whatever you're trying to protect on that wooden block. Yeah, I could have gone in a lot more detail, but I was trying to push through for time. I was covering a wide
There's so
spectrum of
much.
things there.
You can't go fast enough.
Huh?
You can't go fast enough. In our area, we had Idaho one from Canada trying to take over.
Oh, yeah?
Washington killed it, and Idaho killed it, because in Idaho state law, you can't have a foreign company.
You have a what?
You can't have a foreign company
Oh,
own a.
that's
utility.
interesting. That's a smart move.
And
Smart
they
law.
were fighting that, and went to the Idaho Electricity Commission.
Yeah.
Utilities Commission, and the lawyer found the law.
The what?
It was in state law.
Oh,
So he presented it, the commission looked at it, we don't violate state law.
yeah, I think as a conflict of interest, it should not be allowed to have lawyers make laws.
I know a state legislature in Idaho, I helped get two from elected.
Yeah.
I knew a retired Marine colonel. He asked me my opinion.
Well, that would be somebody good to start with, and maybe you can talk to him and tell him about this stuff and see who's best to work with in your
Well, I
state.
meet with them on a weekly basis. when
Okay,
he's on
okay.
the state legislature.
Oh, good.
We're on the same page. I told him I was coming to this.
Yeah.
So I get to meet all sorts of interesting people.
Good.
Like that book I got. You probably saw that one.
Yeah, you showed me that.
Yeah, and Jim Pearl.
Yeah. Have you shown that to Diamond?
No, not yet.
For who?
Diamond, what you got around your neck?
This local arts from Boston.
Oh,
Okay.
I have no idea. It's the smallest. He uses a welder.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
Here.
I live down in Walsh County, in the Florida Panhandle. So
Oh yeah. Well, you're.
seeing all that stuff come off the barges is cool.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to
Well, we got there's a new power plant there in Dover.
It's a good book.
So you down there in one too.
It's probably got a lot of
We used to do
Christian
military
twists.
missions With
Yeah,
England and
it's the old
Pearl
what
send
went on
contractors
My,
out.
my
Well, one of the
father,
boats-
brother brought me a
Oh,
Christian college textbook. It was a workbook for geology class. It didn't teach any geology. It was terrible. I critiqued it from his 192 pages of an edit. I said, edit, the whole book is useless. For science, if you want to teach everybody that dinosaurs were here 2,000 years ago, the Earth is 6,000 years old, and Jesus is coming back, it was a great book. But it had nothing to do with geology. Like, at least tell them what a fossil is. It's in the fossil section, it said fossils are fake. These are distractions sent from God.
The fossils. They got covered by floodwaters and everything
It
else.
doesn't even make any sense. God's like, I'm going to make fake things that throw everybody off.
Now, I know a guy
That
up
is
in
weird.
Coeur d'Alene. He's Jim Pearl. He
Yeah.
worked for the USGS. I was in for 20 years. He's retired. He's been all over the Pacific Northwest and looked at all the geology from catastrophic. He believes in catastrophic.
Yeah, well, there's overwhelming evidence for huge floods recently and a mass extinction, all in the last 12,000 years ago.
Lake Missoula, good example.
Drained into the Pacific catastrophically.
It came through down in 95,
Absolutely.
and you had Rim Rock went through Spokane, and you had,
Randall Carlson is an expert on catastrophic outwash in the Northwest.
and I think Jim Pearl worked with him.
I believe it. There's very few people working on this, so anyone who's working on this probably worked with someone else.
Yeah, and so he's connected with. I got his phone number. I asked him if you could call him if you want to talk to him, because he did Mount St. Helens after it erupted, and he sent the samples to be dated. He didn't tell them where it came from.
Yeah.
The dating, what he got, and what they thought, was two different things, because it's following some sort of narrative.
Uh-huh.
They're just adding numbers because he knew what they were doing in those labs.
Well, there is fraud. We know that.
I got his number if you want to sometime try to get a hold of him.
Who is this?
Jim Pearl.
I'm not interested. I've never heard of him, so I could call a lot of people I've never heard of.
Yeah.
It would be a waste of my time. I have very limited time.
Yeah, I know. He's so busy.
I don't even have time to
You
make a
don't sleep.
show.
You don't even have time to sleep.
Talking to Jim Pearl is probably not on my agenda. Who are you?
Alan, psychiatric nurse from Chicago.
Alan Jensen?
Yeah.
Do I know you? Do you watch the channel?
Yeah, I got all the time.
Oh, cool. You don't comment.
6 months. No, I sent you an email because you put out that bit about the
Yeah,
the
about.
little shares of property.
Mhm.
And I just talked to Rex. I'm gonna hit with him because
Yeah.
he's looking at property.
Yeah, Rex and I are on the same page. The property we initially looked at is unfortunately in an area where it's not viable at all.
The people or the
No, there's no people. The water, the aquifer is 1,300 feet down, so $130,000 would have to be spent on a well.
Uh-huh.
And the community we're developing has 10 people with $10,000. That's not even enough to get water,
Right.
so it's done. So it can't be there unless we have rich people that all put in for a well. And the majority of people only have a little bit of money. They don't have enough to buy their own land and their own thing. So in order to pull it off, we need a parcel that has water. And that had all the resources but water. The water's the most important. So Rex is looking into some older, dilapidated shit with infrastructure there, like wells and old shit systems. Maybe even there's whole towns in our region that are for sale for like 300 grand with like 5 roads and 18 buildings. So that would be something that everyone could chip in 10 grand for and actually already have a town, already have water. It's a piece of crap, but every single day it's better, and then it's become something, as opposed to nothing, which keeps everyone sad because there's nothing there. So you have a well, nobody has any money, and you're like, go, take the dirt and make shit. And usually it's a desperate situation that stays that way. Whereas if you have a town that you're beautifying, repainting, fixing, rehabbing, the results are quick. And there's already water and infrastructure. So you're just fixing the infrastructure. And the idea we have now is that the people involved would all have their own niches as teachers, artists, or plumbers, and that they would spawn all part of a same channel that we develop after the town. And everyone profits on the YouTube, because a successful YouTube channel in 1 year can generate 100,000. If you had multiple talents, you're looking at a different YouTube channel that could be generating 2 or 3 times that. So, yeah, and maybe by the 3rd year, because you'd be teaching the world how to do this, and it would be a lot less startup with a lot
of
quicker.
Brought all.
And there's already infrastructure, so everyone can live in a burnout house with no windows because it at least has a roof, you know?
You got shelter.
Yeah. But if you just move into a desert with nothing, with unskilled people, they feel like, you want us to build stuff? We don't know how to build stuff. You don't have to know how to build a house. You put 4 walls up in the roof. You just need an engineer to figure out if it's going to collapse and kill you. So buying an older, dilapidated house, town is probably a better idea, because they're affordable and there's lots of them.
And if it's been vacant, the structures that are worthy of saving will be self-evident.
They'll be perfect.
They're going to be in good shape. The crowd's going to already have fallen down.
What do I punch?
Just finish tearing it
You
down.
need to pay for it, and it's not on YouTube. No, it's on Clean, and you have to have paid for it. Did you pay for it? If you paid for it, then you have a link to it. So the only people that paid for the live stream have a link to it.
Okay, well, I didn't pay for it. I guess I don't get my link.
It's not on YouTube, so you can't see it there.
No, I didn't say it. I said the link.
I don't have it because I'm not allowed to pay for it. I created it. So someone who paid for it has a link, and you can get it from them, I'm sure. But the live stream is right now Greg Allison just sitting there, finishing his talk. And now it's you. You're in the live stream. No, it's just the screen.
I can't be seen on TV.
It's just the screen.
Oh, too late.
So you'd have to walk over here.
You've been found. What do you think? Do you have a models release?
Christian Westbrook has been canceled. He will be returning Sunday.
Participants, do we get the live stream or the recording?
There are none yet. When they're available, whoever came here will be able to access them. But that probably won't be for a week.
Yeah, no, plenty of time.
So, and we have, whoever bought tickets is on our listserv, and you had to give your email, so we'll just email that to all.
all the proceedings.
If you bought a ticket, you'll get a link.
Yeah, I was going to say my question in regards to the location that you chose,
For?
where your ranch is. So I'm guessing that you didn't have as much knowledge as you do now at the time that you picked.
No, I had the most knowledge of anyone on Earth. I've been a field geologist for 26 years. I've world traveled.
So my question is,
I learned how to field map with the USGS executives in the middle of the desert. So I'm a top field mapper. I spent 6 weeks in the desert mapping unmapped regions of the US that were supposedly mapped in the 80s.
So in
So I have
regards
a
to the
very good
40th
knowledge of the surface of the
40th
earth.
parallel and above going on.
If you're listening to Wheel Barger information, disregard it. The man has no knowledge in geology, the surface of the earth, or he knows what the CIA has told him. And he knows what books have told him.
And I have heard a lot from him.
And a lot of books are full of shit.
Yeah.
So he's telling everyone to move to the equator. There's no scenario that has ever occurred ever in recorded history. And him saying it means it's even dumber because there's nothing to back it up except him saying it. What we do know is the Maunder minimum and the Dalton minimum, temperatures fluctuated less than 1.8 degrees over most of the world. So even if you lived in northern Canada where it gets 60 degrees for the high, the low would now be 58.5. Unless you had special equipment, you wouldn't even know that the crops are failing because it's exactly the same as it always is. So it's easy to dupe the public into saying it's getting hot Because if you just tell them every day it's getting hot for 10 years, guess what it does every year? No matter where you are, it gets hot. So if they're telling you it's getting hotter and it's hot out, you're like, God, it is hotter. But there's no way a human body in 100 years can tell a climate change ever unless there's a catastrophic volcanic eruption. Even during the 100,000-year maximum glaciations, it takes 1,300 years for global temperature to drop 13 degrees. That's, 40 generations. So your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson might be able to tell the difference from the weather where you're at than today, while you're in the ice age and he wasn't.
So short of massive volcanic activity, you don't see those areas having.
There's no place that's offline for anything, ever. During the maximum glacial period, Clovis people were growing hemp at the end of an end moraine in Northern Europe. That was the coldest time on Earth. So if you can grow pot in Northern Europe during the top of the ice age, and a grand solar minimum, you can grow pot in the Arctic. There is no, but the problem is you can't industrially grow food. The way we grow food won't work if the temperature drops a half a degree and the rain shifts.
Good.
They would have to shift agriculture somewhere. But they haven't never shifted agriculture. They fix it by subsidizing it and making your farmers fail. So farmers are failing now to get money, and there's no food being produced during a time when the food is being produced less and less. So at some point there'll be a tipping point, and they're not telling us that they're taking out of those resources because that's what the supplies are for, right? We have those supplies so that we can take from them. In the last few winters and springs, most of the wheat there's a glut in the market, and wheat is dropping because it's now being used for animal food. So if you are smart, you now get an animal farm that needs grain because grain is $4 for 50 pounds. And you can make shit tons of money feeding animals on the grain that's basically free. You can even plant the grain and hope that it will be a good season where it'll be human grain. Because a lot of this is hard red wheat that's too small because it was shitty or drought or too wet. And it's food now, but it actually grows wheat. So you can be stockpiling this hard wheat that's only for animals to grow for humans if it's a good year.
If it's successful, if not,
Yeah,
you
and
just have
you're
more food for the critters.
Well, for the critters, but you're making tons of money. So, but that's not how the farming system is developed. So it's imperative to be growing food, permaculture, any area is survivable. But most of the planet is high population. So the survivability will be a nightmare. Any event that causes grid failure will result in unrest and you becoming a victim, because the human condition is to go help people. If you see everyone when you look outside starving and you know some of them, you're going to tell them to come in and eat your shit and you're all going to die. And that's what happens from the margins to the cities. The cities get destroyed first. The zombies walk out. People feel sorry. Everyone's dead. And then there's the last few people that think they're all alone, but they're not. Like our whole town won't even change. Some idiots will stay stuff and they'll get shot. But there's not enough people. And there's enough area. We have geothermal greenhouses, and our river stays warm in the winter for 2 miles. That literally people could all camp by the river and never be cold. And we don't have a lot of people. No one will make it there. It's hundreds of miles from anyone would make it there. No one would decide, let's walk 600 miles to Pagosa. Because you get 10 miles and die, or someone would shoot you and eat you. So the location you're at and the resources you have is imperative. And there's very few places that have good water that hasn't been fracked, because if there's major earthquakes or unrest on the earth, faults and fractures are going to take that frack water and spread it throughout the aquifers. So anywhere you're near Oklahoma, Texas, where there's toxic waste or poison or pipelines, they're going to fracture and be in the water. So if you're not by a close source of running water from a continental divide that was just manufactured during the last season, there will be no way to eliminate toxins. They'll be everywhere in the subsurface. And then if a large volcanic eruption occurs at the same time, it pollutes all the surface water. So at that point, there will be no groundwater and no surface water. And these are things that no one has thought about. But if you have 9,000 gallons worth of water on your property underground, you could probably live for a very fucking long time. Because in a matter of months or years, the sulfur dioxide contaminated water will flush itself out. Eventually, all the ash will come out of the sky and the sun will come out. And then when it rains that first day, you'll drink it. It doesn't taste like poison. But things like that could happen, and they have happened. And during a magnetic reversal and the magnetosphere waning the way it is, the amount of cosmic rays are going to cause major volcanic activity. Could happen now, could happen in a year. it will happen in a decade.
So worst case
There's not much
scenario,
time.
being multiples going off and getting the scenario like we've had in the past with a year without a summer, without a gross
I think
season.
this will be a little bigger. I think
2
this
years?
event will kick off with a VEI-5 in Iceland, followed by VEI-7 in Indonesia, which will be more of effect than a year without a summer because it's both hemispheres. So it will be a year without a summer globally.
A couple gross seasons.
And then if a third volcano blows, it'll be a few years without a summer. And that will be a wake-up call because then you're going to have like massive population reduction in third world countries and other areas of unrest, specifically Indonesia, where there's 400 million people. They're all going to be running like hell from that god that erupted. It's going to smell like rotten people in Indonesia. There'll be 100,000 dead on the beach, and they'll be washing up for weeks. It's be disgusting. That's what happened in Krakatoa. And that was nothing. That was like thousands of people washing up for days. Mom, want to go to the beach? Because who's burying those? No one buried them back then. They waited for turtles and shit to take that out. Or you kept throwing the dead body out.
Yeah, who's got time to do it? So 3-year, 4-year, no gross season under the worst case scenario of
That's just
multitude?
volcanic.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is as we come out of the solar minimum in 21, by 2023, we're going to have an X flare to fry a portion of the grid. People are going to catch on, start panicking because a whole section of the earth, we're going to be watching real time through satellites and social media what is happening. Like if it's in central Russia that takes out 50,000 square miles, the people in the center are screwed because they won't be able to escape fast enough before they're taking control of it in one way or the other. Because when you have limited resources, you either kill the people and steal their goods, or I mean, it'll just be terrible. But whatever happens, we'll watch it, and hopefully it won't happen in the U.S.
Sure.
There's a very low probability.
Where it's facing.
It's very low probability it'll happen here. We're a small country, and that's the whole rest of the world. So we're going to watch it happen, and it'll probably be a solar flare that screws with the grid. And if it's a major flare, it's literally going to light the world on fire. So if there's a major like X40 and the magnetosphere wanes for a couple more years, wherever that energy goes for 12 hours is going to light that section of the earth on fire. All the houses will light on fire, which will light all the forests on fire, which will light all the cities on fire. And then you have the biggest fire ever that we're watching. And there'll be like some firefighters on TV trying to put the biggest fire in the world out. And then about day 2, they'll be like, go home. It's 8,000 miles wide by 8,000 miles wide. And we have 1,400 firefighters.
And that happened in the...
But the only time we have correlated it happening, it was very bad. And this is what is being called the solar outburst or the cosmic impact. 11,500 years ago, all of North America was burned. And you can Google the black mats. Yeah, now the black mats were found all over North America in the late 90s. We were correlating them across the country. But something happened in the next 10 years where Russian scientists picked up on our science and they started releasing the research in Russia and Siberia, which corroborated and correlated exactly to all of the findings in North America, that there was stishovite, shock quartz, microspherules, nanodiamonds, cosmic debris, and a black mat. And the black mat, they concluded, represented the entire inundation of all boreal forests in Siberia, which means all the forests burned and we're in a 1-inch layer. And if all the forests burn, all the life burns, pretty much. You can't get away from a global forest fire. So 11,500 years ago, all of North America burned. And so we know that.
Due to a solar flare.
It lit it on fire. And there were no buildings or wires. So that was a major event. We're talking a 1/10 the event with infrastructure doing the same thing because the buildings will light on fire. All the wires in the walls will heat up and light the buildings on fire. And no one will know they're going to light on fire before you know it. Then the walls will smoke, and then most of the people inside will die because they're like towering infernos that is heating up in the wall, then goes, oh! So you wouldn't be able to get out. So that's why we got out of major cities, simply for the solar flare threat. I didn't watch Greg's talk, but did he allude to any of that? Were you in here?
No. Not really solar flares, is more EMP, nuclear.
You showed pictures of it, but didn't have time to go into detail on each one. So
yeah, so the biggest threat is the threat from space, and it comes in a multifaceted front. You got the waning magnetosphere, and we were just talking to to Adrian, who's talking now, and his father, who's the surgeon to make the breakthrough on the fact that the KP index is directly correlative to myocardial infarction and heart health. This was impossible to do before because no one in the mainstream medical field was willing to take space weather, break HIPAA laws, go back here and look at the patient records, come back here, you say it matched, but I can't tell you why. And that's all that is required. You still maintain the HIPAA law. You just looked at all of the people. And then I told you that it did match. So you didn't know who the people were. But it's almost impossible to find that data because the companies that have all the medical information charge you $19,000 if you want to know how many people had gonorrhea or gallbladder cancer, because they can charge you that. They own it. So it's impossible as a layman to get that data to make correlations. But because he had 30 years of data, said, okay, son, I'll do it. He did it. And he said, it matches. That all the people that come in for major strokes and heart attacks are coming in at KP0 days. And it matched 100%. It wasn't like close. It was it. That if we could warn everyone that has a heart condition the day before the storm, half those people would live. So you need to sip on tomorrow, sip a Mai Tai, don't stress yourself and watch cartoons. And then you probably wouldn't get up or get pissed off and go, oh, and die. And then it became even more real when John Casey had a stroke. During the last time it was KP8, during the last major solar flare. And that was the same time that OTF happened, where we found that information out.
Well, we were talking about that on your channel.
Observing the frontier.
Oh, yeah.
When you were talking about that on your channel, after the fact, and weeks before, there was all kinds of code moves in the hospital. I work in a hospital.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. A lot of cardiac noise.
And as the magnetosphere wanes, it mimics the same as us moving out of this. James. Moving out, Ben talks about moving into a void in space. We're going into a bubble. We're coming out of the spiral arm. So that would be the same exposure to those elements to create heart attacks and craziness that we've correlated is the same as the magnetosphere waning. So we're doing both at the same time. So there could be a point in 30 years where half the planet is fucking literally insane. And maybe that's the zombie. Like,
about Ben Davidson? It explains a lot.
Ben Davidson talks about moving through the universe from a thicker area to a thinner area. He says we're moving into a bubble. And that's simply, when I was describing the galactic arms, we came through an arm and now we're going into a void. And that mimics the same exact thing as the magnetosphere waning. As our magnetosphere wanes, we're entering the void. More cosmic radiation comes in. UVA, UVB, UVC. Every single part of the spectrum through thousands of megahertz, right? It all increases. Not just cosmic rays. Those are one of the millions that'll be coming in. So when you go outside and feel hotter or get burned faster, it's because you are. It's not because it's global warming. It's the same temperature outside, but you're like, oh my God.
So how do you protect yourself from that?
You can wear clothes.
Clothes, hats.
But you can't put sunscreen on because the second you put sunscreen on, it's in your bloodstream. That's the paper coming out. So if you ever use sunscreen, you're probably giving yourself cancer. 100% of the people that use it are giving themselves the opportunity to get cancer. But only sick people get cancer.
You're right. So
as long as your immune system is fine, you can use sunscreen. But if you're diabetic and you're trying to go to the beach and rub sunscreen on, that's like a death sentence. So cosmic radiation is stay inside, work at night, go in a cave, and you'll make it.
Sunglasses and hats.
Yeah, because you're going to get cataracts.
Yeah.
I mean,
so you can't like put a lead lined hat on.
So certain metals block just limited bands.
Okay, so the full spectrum isn't.
And the most damaging is cosmic rays, which there is no protection from. You'd need a whole planet to protect you, like a small percentage, which is why we can land on the moon, because if we went to the side of the moon, you'd be dead. If we went to the back side of the moon, you'd be deader. But if we're right in the middle of the dark side of the moon, the whole moon is blocking the cosmic radiation. It's the only place you could land, and these guys probably won't die. That's what they were hoping. And they didn't die, but they all got cataracts. And the one changed a little and looks a little weirder than his twin brother.
A lot.
Yeah, but they.
Science fiction.
But had they gone, so one of the reasons why NASA's like, oh, we can't go to the moon now is it's way different now on that same spot. The reason they claim they lost the technology of the spacesuit is because if you put the spacesuit they had back on now, you wouldn't make it. You would not make it. It's just an airtight suit. There is no, and the cosmic radiation since the moon landing.
Exponential.
On the surface, it's the same as the astronauts on the moon now. Here. So can you imagine we went to the moon? The astronaut would be like, I'm dying. It's death. That would be terrible TV. And they don't have a cosmic ray suit. So if we go there, and I guarantee we will soon, we're going to stay in the ship and send out a robot. And there'll be an explanation, and it won't be because of the danger of the astronauts. Because the technology is so much better in the robot that you'd be wasting time and money to go out there.
So do you believe the only purpose that they went to the moon in the first place was to see the activity of the sunburst to the moon?
The transcripts recently released in the last decade prove that. That's all they're talking about is looking for the glass. If you find any glass, got more glass over here. There's some glass over there. And not one newspaper article ever said about the glass found on the moon. It's not. None of it's about that. All the schools got moon rocks. We had 10 moon rocks at Temple. There was no glass at Temple. Are we supposed to have a part of the mission? But someone has all the glass. I've never seen a base of that glass. No one has. Which is really fucked up because that's what they collected mostly, the glass.
And that was the goal.
That's what they're looking for.
That was proof of solar.
Outburst. Well, they probably knew about it already from glass found in the Sierra.
Is it accurate that we had an X-47 like in 2016 or 17 that was not Earth facing?
It was in the back. Yeah. It's probably higher. So the X-47 was an early estimate. It could have been an X-257. So there's no monitor in that range to tell. And what happened in the solar storm that happened on Mars, which was facing, lasted for like 14 days.
After the burst?
Yeah, so it was huge. And if that was at Earth, we would not be here. We wouldn't be at this conference. I'd be alive. You'd probably be alive. Most of us would be alive because we're here. You would have to escape. Fort Collins would turn into a zombie apocalypse. People would run out of food, and you would probably look for Oppenheimer Ranch. But we would have been fucked. But the nature of the sun during minimums is these major flares don't come off until they pass the exterior of the limb because of that. What the Maunders discovered to make it the Maunder minimum was that the sunspots shut down during grand minimus. Like they were waiting for a solar flare and it would shut down and then it would come back up. And so that's what has been happening. The same thing they witnessed, we're now seeing now. So when was the major solar flare after the last minimum? It was as we came out of it, right? So you had the Maunder minimum, then the Dalton minimum, and then the Carrington event.
So 1759?
But what I'm showing you is that you go down, and as you come up is when the event happens. And then you can scale that down to single solar cycles. We're dropping into 24. We're at the bottom. We'll be there until 2020, mid-2020 will come up, and 2021 is when the solar will happen. So that is the minimum time frame for a global grid failure for you to prepare, which is, that's the beginning. And I think by 2023, we'll definitely have one because that whole cycle will peak in 24, 25. And then we'll drop down cycle 25 into the coldest minimum ever experienced by humans that we have information on. The bottom of 25 will be brutal because it begins the 2028 to 2035 death time, where all the major grain and crops growing zones will be offline because it will snow in through till July and there will be no way to plant. And then it'll start, and then if you try to plant something, it'll start snowing in October and it won't be anything. So you either literally grow lettuce or kale. I don't think the world's ready for that. But we could have a perennial kale crop in all the growing zones that could feed everyone. More nutrient dense than any food ever grown there. And the whole world would be healthy during a grand solar minimum. But no one will do that. And one bag of kale seeds literally will, a 50-pound bag of kale seeds, you could grow food in 50 acres with that one bag. Because I don't know if you know, a packet of kale seeds can grow an acre. This is like 10,000 seeds, and you need one every foot. I mean, it's a huge amount of food. Whereas grains, they overseed. 80% of the grain rots in the ground and it doesn't grow.
We weren't designed to eat it anyways.
Yeah. So shit's about to hit the fan, and this is a great time to learn about it and prepare. Because the events are going to be minor and walk through. That's the most likely scenario. It will slowly decay. The temperature slowly drops. Nobody will notice it. Volcanoes slowly increase. Nobody notices it. prices go up, nobody notices it. And then in 2023, you're going to hear on the news, a major solar storm is apparent to hit Earth. And it will be in all the papers, and people are like, wait, is that bad? Nah, I saw that on the Express for the last decade. It's bullshit, honey. And then they'll wake up, and it'll be really quiet. And they'll be like, nothing's working. Oh, they'll have the power back on. And then that will be the going story. They're going to have the power back on. What are you doing? Oh, the power will be back on. And then about 4 days in, the rumor will get out, and they'll be like, the power's not coming on for 3 months. The power's not coming on for 3 years.
Stores are empty by then.
Back in your hole. So it's a really quick transition that you need to be prepared for.
So I'm glad you clarified, because the cold was a main issue on me looking at different areas. So I'm single, I don't have kids, I can go pretty much anywhere I want. I'm 34 years established where I live, and I think where I am in Florida is a pretty good place to be for what's coming our way, short of some major.
If you're not within 50 miles of the northern border, Florida is a no-go zone because there's no roads out. So as soon as people find out something's wrong, you'll never leave. The last minor hurricane, no one could get out of from Miami. They got stuck mid-state, and then it became.
Why would I leave? That's my point.
Why wouldn't you leave? Because you'll be eaten.
No, I'm saying, why would I leave?
If you stay there, and when the grid goes down forever, unless you have a fortress, they're coming for you. And they are the last desperate people. There are millions of people. They're all going to come for everyone until the last one is dead and eaten. Until there's nothing left, not a flake of food, that's what it will look like. So you need to get out in a rural area where no one can get to and be there. Because when it happens, you go out and you say, you're not getting there.
So
and they're never coming.
For rural, you need more than a gas tank of fuel away.
It has to be 250 miles from a city. And that's Flagstaff. And then between us and Flagstaff is all desert and mountain ranges. No one would ever walk that. They would need days of food, a horse. And you wouldn't decide to do that. You'd eat your horse. No one will ever come where I am.
What about Cortez?
Cortez is fine.
There's not enough people there.
And that's not many. There's only 10,000 south in Durango, and they're pretty self-sufficient. Most of the idiots will die in that town because they'll be just desperate people, smart. And then there's so much to loot in Durango. All those rich assholes, their houses are filled with liquor and food. So all the hungry people will go up and be living in mansions. They're never going to get to Cortez. It's like a poor rural farm town.
Yeah, if you don't have a car,
it's a hell of a drive.
That's a heavy pass.
Yeah, so these areas all over the Four Corners are easy spots to make it.
So I understand, I mean, Florida being now the third most populous state, there's too many people, but.
It's illegal to use solar. It has to be grid tied. You can't have a backup generator. If you have batteries and people know about it, you'll be fined. Blip, 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 blip.
When you're agricultural, there's a lot of things you can do that everybody else can't do. So we gotta.
They're coming for you.
Maybe. I better be good at dodging bullets.
So I'm not against Florida, except I'm against Florida. You either live in the marsh of the intercoastal in some kind of invisible swamp buggy that floats, surrounded by turrets of guns, or you're probably someone's going to find you.
You got part of that right.
If you cut the top of the state off, first thing that they eat is the silver meat, and that's the ladies going to the 4:30 buffet. It doesn't taste good, but it's abundant. And if you cook it long enough slow, it tastes just like chicken.
Longhorn. Fair enough.
This is live. We apologize for the graphic nature of this content. Yes, that's my beliefs. These are just all my beliefs based on potential outcomes. There's the odds of a major catastrophe happening first are very low. So you're going to see a slow rollout of food going offline during this minimum. The next winter will be worse. It'll catch up in the stores. And then as we come up into 25, we're going to see flares that are hitting the grid. So you can see little perturbations. About 2021, 22, we may see so we haven't had an X flare since October 2017. We're already in a 2X drought. So by 2021, we'll be in a 4X drought. So we will have an X flare by then. By 2022, we have to. What are your thoughts on that?
High probability, but hey, we may reach one more M flare to take it out of the grid.
Yeah, so by that time, even an M8 with the coronal mass ejection, Earth facing,
yeah,
that could be it. And then we'll be able to watch because it'll only be local. Let's say 800 square miles. It may grow into a rolling blackout regionally, but whoever's on the other side of the world will probably watch it.
Sure. The X class flare, big enough to take out the whole world.
Yeah, anything at X20 or higher,
Whole world.
especially if it's the center of a major grid portion, it would wipe the grid because it would connect to everything. Probably go through the ocean. Isn't there wire under the Atlantic?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
going right under
Yeah.
there.
Yes. Bone cable.
And coming up in New York. Boom. So it should
But
be interesting.
If you take the New York area, the megalopolis there, that's why I mentioned a balloon position over that area would take out 100 million people instantly. 100 million people.
For an EMP.
Yeah, for an EMP.
Makes more food for the rest.
And then you have to worry about what I think Greg talked about because I wasn't here is the threat of global unrest being manipulated by governments. So they know
Bingo.
it's coming.
Talk about that.
Grid down. As soon as the grid goes down, they're like, Sudan's out, let's go in. So these other countries are going to move in and bomb other countries and take them over.
Sure.
They don't have any power. Take all their food because we need it.
David was showing North Africa. That's going to be an ugly place to be with the Chinese and the Europeans trying to fight for the same.
And people don't realize how many countries are up
I'm
there.
betting on the Chinese.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They eat very little, so it's good. We'll want them around.
Yeah, my money's on the Chinese because they'll fight. I'm about them North Europeans.
And I think the most important part is a region you live in or stay in or decide is yours because the people around you also believe that there could be an event, that they're all there because if it happens, we'll work together. So everyone on my road that I'm friends with, which is everyone, they're like, we know why you're here. And then I go over their house and he's got an arsenal and a tank and fucking 4 other houses and there's people living in the back. And I'm like, what the fuck? Oh yeah, you want to see my, so be on a dead end road with like-minded people. A lot of people move to Arkansas because when you go up in the Ozarks, they're all dead end roads and you meet the people, they're all preppers. These guys got canals and fish and water supplies and guns. So
you're familiar with Ocala National Forest?
Yeah.
So that's the best of where you can get. Yes, there's population.
Yeah, I would say Ocala. Yeah, because you can go into it and hide.
Well, we're right there.
Edge.
What do you mean into it?
If you're a national park near a population center, everybody's going there. So be careful. But stealth camping is a technique to develop, huh?
About 2 years ago, you talked with a man who lived on, I think it's Tuxedo Island, and you guys talk about like the bees, like some kind of bees to fill the like beeswax or the the cone they made to insulate your house.
I remember him. He's an author in British Columbia.
Yeah, I live about like 30-minute drive from that island.
Oh, cool.
So,
but his breakthrough was simply to blow up air in the wall, and that's the final conclusion. So it's a customized bag you blow up in each of your sections.
Yeah. I hear that, but there wasn't any talk after of how that can be done.
Yeah, he said he was going to send me his pictures, and that was it.
Nothing.
Yeah.
What's the shit?
Well, you could find him. I don't remember the author.
I know.
He's 30 minutes from you, huh?
Yeah, he's not 30-minute ferry away from.
Well, then hurry up.
There you go.
Dude, where's the installation?
I listened to your channel for about 2 years now, and some stuff I try to learn, like so the town I live in, there's only population of 30,000 and surrounding. But I don't want to be there. I understand the area there. I have a cave.
Good.
There's some forest I know in the area pretty well because my parents are slough picker.
You need to flesh out that cave a little bit and be ready to go into it.
Well, the cave I kind of know a little bit. I know the surrounding water, and I know there is some stuff I learned from you. You can eat tree bark and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's a lot.
But
hey, that's right. If you watch my videos, I show there's a lot of food out there. You
Now,
know.
knowing your environment is a lot because not everybody's going to be in the same place.
British Columbia is the same as Cascadia.
Just
Because we're in the U.S., we only show the data of 8 United States volcanoes erupting in the Dalton Minimum. Mount St. Helens, Mount Baker, Mount Whitney.
You got them up there.
If you go up north of there were 13 more towards
I live
Alaska.
exactly on the Cascadia fault zone.
So those volcanoes will be erupting.
I live in Alaska. Erupting?
Yeah, but there's no towns real close. They're all east and safe. You'll watch them blow.
Except for the wave coming up through Anchorage.
If there's a tsunami, yeah.
But you're far enough away from that.
But even during the magnitude 9 in the 60s, there was no catastrophic tsunami.
Been to Fairbanks.
So the odds are low up in Alaska.
Where I was at, that was the big city.
Yeah.
Substantial for Fairbanks and for
It'd be good to see
A minor
somebody from
tsunami.
interior Alaska running.
So
Somebody from down.
the known major tsunamis is on the Cascadia Rip right off of Oregon. So it is known that water has washed
They
up
don't know what I'm
600
talking
feet.
I asked you a question that.
If it that hit Fairbanks and it was 600 feet high, there would be no people. But everyone, mostly everyone lived. They didn't get crushed. So that's the difference. I think
600 feet,
Alaska.
So what are your thoughts on methane release? If Alaska is supposed to warm?
Most of the methane is in the deep ocean and a little bit of fart. I mean, you got to understand how much methane comes out of cows' asses.
Oh, yes.
That's why California has bags on them. There is a lot of methane.
We need to give the environmentalists of the Millennium Award to Wild Bill Cody.
Is he the fart bag inventor?
No, he killed all those buffaloes. If he hadn't killed all those buffaloes, the whole universe would have been incinerated by now from global warming.
Yeah. That would have.
So that's going to be one of the first actions. The Glacial Inland Preservation Society, GIPS, is our first action going to be to posthumously give the Environmentalist Award to Wild Bill Cody.
The eliminator of global warming cattle.
He saved the whole world.
So again, everyone wants a catastrophic thing that's going to kill us all instantly. I showed you on a graph. It's not instantly. It's geologically instantly, which means 1,300 years, which is 50 generations. So anything that we see that's catastrophic is going to be an X flare that we know happened, and we all know we're about to be screwed, and we'll watch it happen, or there'll be a major volcanic eruption that will darken the sky. It's really the only two. If there's a solar flare that's big enough, it's probably not going to be a micronova. That's a new term. And we know what those look like. We already ad nauseum talked about the Carrington event. Like most people can mimic the Cuba incident and the sun glowing and blah, 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 because those are the only 8 sentences that came out of that event.
I know what it was I was going to ask you.
What?
The event in North Carolina that you mentioned.
Carolina Bays.
Carolina Bays.
That you said that was an isolated event. Was that like something from an X flare?
It's not an isolated event. There are 15,000 impact structures in that entire region.
There's a whole array of bays.
It's not global is what I mean.
It is global.
A small
No,
event.
the Carolina Bays are one localized effect of the mass extinction.
That effect is seen in other places too.
What's causing that kind of
I told you in my talk, no one knows. It's a cacophony of events.
Is it a
The
plasma
magnetic,
discharge?
no, that's one thing. The magnetic reversal occurs. Cosmic rays come in. The sun flares. Debris falls in. Do you know that every single one of the satellites is going to hit Earth? That's going to cause weather in the ocean due to evaporation. It's going to cause the ground to light on fire. There are multiple events.
Yeah.
I showed you 5 events during the last mass extinction. That can't be the Carolina Bays. That can't be a comet. It could be the Carolina Bays, a comet. It could be a solar flare.
A bunch of
It has to be 5 things because there were 5 things that happened during that mass extinction. 5 geologically instantaneous shifts in temperature. That if it was one thing, there would be one shift. So someone that says it's a comet is a liar. Someone that says it's a solar micronova is a liar. Someone that says it's global warming is a liar. Someone that says it's global cooling is a liar.
Yeah, it's a combination.
Yeah, there is an effect that we are unaware of that is cyclic. It always happens every 100,000 and 26,000 years. It is nested in different amounts, and we are just figuring out that we don't know. So anyone that says they know, I can just show them one graph and be like, bullshit. Because it could be one of those things. The first dryas could be a comet. The second dryas could be a solar flare. The third dryas could be the fact that because of the solar flare, the oceans evaporated and now it's snowball Earth. And then it warmed because it was supposed to be warm the whole time and we went back to normal. So do you see how that works? It's lots of things. And it happens regularly. So there's a cosmogenic external effect. It's a clock. There is a clock cycle, but I don't think it's Doug Vogt's clock. The clock cycle is a 100,000-year cycle. I showed you. It's the epoch of data. Where every 100,000 years, there's a mass extinction. And who knows what it is? We don't know what it is. We call it.
Well, the poles are getting closer together and they're migrating, and that's causing.
You want to see them?
I've seen them for Vostok Oscar, but you've got a lot of data. I'd like to get some of those charts you got.
I'll email them.
And I think the weather's going to intensify greatly the closer that they get to each other.
Well, the weather is intensifying by space energy. And this is proven by Ben Davidson and others. So as the magnetosphere wanes, the space energy comes quicker into the global electric circuit. So minor M flares 2 years ago caused perturbations to the grid, which should not happen. That means that as the magnetosphere wanes more, that same M5 is now going to do something we never thought it could do, like light Chicago on fire. This fall, I showed you that running explosion in that town. It was like, that was from like a C5. That was from a coronal hole stream that got us to KP5, I think. So a little event and shit'll be crazy. And so far, the explanation for the past 3 years is like, oh, we don't know. It's a They're not saying space weather. No one said space weather.
So do you think it's a charged atmosphere already that's allowing
Hail to increase?
No.
Yes.
The increase of energy from 5 years ago didn't have much of an effect. But now that same energy coming from space.
So space is,
and
it's getting closer. The space atmosphere transition has been collapsing. So space is 20 miles closer than it was when you were a kid. It's going to get closer and closer. So that allows less filtering of the energy coming from space, which is why you burn faster. It feels hotter out. The sun is less atmosphere. And when it gets down to 5%, you might be able to launch in a plane and at 15,000 feet be in space during that event. But the other side of the Earth would have a thicker atmosphere. It's interesting how it works. So we got 5 minutes. We're going to do a workshop in here. 5 minutes.
Well, we're loving it.
5 minutes.
Email, you have a lot of email. Is that yours?
So I'm just gonna make it.
You guys know.
So the